Well, I think that one of the features and lessons we've all learned over the last year, and has been brought home to me as well on my various visits, is the interconnectivity of the global economy. And no one is actually, unless you're a self-sufficient island who doesn't transact with anyone, no one has been unaffected by the events of the last 12 to 18 months. Because even if a banking system in a particular country was well regulated and no banks bought any toxic assets, currency movements and the reduction in world trade has an impact. I went to Morocco early on. Morocco is a country where its currency is pegged to the euro, but they're not in the eurozone. And although their banks were unaffected in the first wave, this year they've been suffering because of the huge decline in tourism and the collapse of one of their principal exports, textiles, which has meant that impairment, bad loans, or loans that businesses have been unable to service have been rising very sharply, and that's had an impact on the banking community. But as the year has progressed, I think we've seen this is much calmer. I mean, we're coming up to the anniversary of what I call the Lehman Brothers weekend. The world looked pretty grim that weekend, and in the week after, there were areas that you wondered if they were in free fall. Well, we're not in that situation. It's much calmer. There are obviously difficulties. I mean, clearly Ukraine has suffered. It's needing support from the IMF. That's fine. I mean, that's what the IMF is there to do. Obviously, the IMF is suggesting to or making conditions for its support in terms of economic reform, reductions in the public sector deficit, which Ukraine will need to do, and it will need to do to come through this. If you went back 30 years to 1976, the UK was in a position then when it required assistance from the IMF. We had to take some painful and unpleasant medicine, but 5 years later we were making very rapid progress successfully, or 3 years later. And I think that's the sort of message in some ways that Ukraine will have to have, that when you get into a situation, it's like, a child when it's ill, or even an adult. No one actually likes taking unpleasant medicine, but sometimes we have to in order to actually recover.